There's nothing like the aroma and taste of fresh, warm bread. When we were traveling in Latin America and east of Europe, yeast breads were sometimes difficult to find. After days of eating tortillas and Eastern flatbreads, we would long for the taste of home. And that's when I would bring out my skillet and make bannock bread for breakfast. Bannock bread probably originated in the Scottish Highlands and was brought to the New World by immigrants. In America, it was adapted for campfire cooking by Native Americans, trappers, and pioneers. Today, I'm going to show you how to make that delicious bread that became a staple of our journey. You'll need a heavy skillet with a lid. A cast iron skillet is perfect, but any Dutch oven or heavy skillet will do. The ingredients are basic: flour, sugar, salt, fat, baking powder, powdered milk, and liquid. So let's get started. I have pre-measured in this bowl 2½ cups of all-purpose flour. You can use half white flour and half wheat if you like. To that I'm going to add ½ cup of powdered milk. Now if you don't have powdered milk, you can leave it out and just use milk for the liquid. Then ½ teaspoon of salt, 3 teaspoons of sugar. This is because I'm making a sweet version today. And 2 teaspoons of baking powder. You want to mix them all well together so all the dry ingredients are incorporated. The next thing we're going to be adding is the fat. I probably used mostly butter when I was cooking it in the van, but any kind of fat will work. First, if you're using a solid shortening, like butter, you want to cut it up in little pieces first before you put it in. It's a lot like making biscuits or pie. You can use bacon fat, Crisco, margarine, butter, coconut oil. Any of those things will work. Today, I'm using the most basic 2-knife method. If you have a pastry cutter, you can do that. It's a lot easier. I didn't have a pastry cutter in the van. And after a few minutes of this, I usually gave up and moved to my fingers. You're trying to rub the fat into the flour so that it's going to break up in little bits. And I like to do this with my hands so I can feel how small the little bits of butter are becoming, but you don't want to just like stir. You want to kind of rub the butter into the flour. When your flour and butter mixture begins to look crumbly and evenly distributed in all small pieces, now is the time when you can add your additions if you want to. You can add sweet additions like raisins, dried fruit, chopped nuts, anything that goes into a sweet bread. Or if you want a savory bread, you could add green onions, grated cheese, bacon, bits of sausage or ham. Herbs like parsley, cilantro, whatever suits your menu. Today, I'm going to add blueberries, dried blueberries. About a cup and a half. Mix them all in very well so every blueberry is covered with the flour. Once you have incorporated the blueberries well into the flour mixture so that every berry is a little bit coated, it's time to add the liquid, milk or water. I have a cup of liquid here, but I'm not going to add it all at once because I don't want the dough to be too moist. So I'm going to start with about 3/4 of this cup and see how it comes together. I want it just to hold together, not to be too gooey. Like every kind of biscuit, you don't want to work this too much. It needs to be just so it holds together. That's about perfect. So now I have a thick dough, and I'm going to gather it gently together in a ball. I have some flour here. I'm going to put a little bit down on the board and turn this dough out. And here we are, ready to start baking our bread. I have the skillet already heating on a low fire. Some cooks like to fry their bannock bread. Then you could just put a little oil in the bottom of the pan, and if you fry it, you're going to have to flip it in the middle, but you don't have to use the lid. I prefer mine pan baked, so I'm going to put a little bit of flour in the bottom of the pan to keep the bread from sticking quite so easily, and pat my bread into a nice disc. So then I'm now going to put it in the pan, and I'm going to pat it out to about, so it'll be about an even 1 inch thickness, so that it'll cook evenly. This recipe more or less fills my pan, just not quite all the way to the edges, which makes it possible for me to turn it if I want, or check the edges. I have the pan on a very low flame, just below medium, and I'm going to put the lid on it. Now I have to watch it fairly well for the first 5 minutes to make sure it's cooking at a nice, even, slow rate, because I don't want it to cook too fast or it might burn on the bottom. Well, the bread's been cooking for about 5 minutes, so I'm going to quickly check it and see how it's doing. I just want to lift the edge just enough to be able to see how the underside is browning. It's a nice golden color, so I think it'll be fine. But throughout the cooking time, I do peek at it occasionally, but you don't want to lift the lid too much because that destroys the oven aspect of it. You need to keep an eye on it while it's cooking. You can always move the pan off the heat if it's getting brown too fast. Total cooking time is about 20 minutes, and we're going to try and leave it as undisturbed as I can stand. Well, I think the bread might be ready, and it's time for us to do the fun part. I have here a plate to put the bread on, a plate for my piece, butter. I love melty butter all over it, and honey. Of course, you can put jam, or if you made a savory one, melted cheese. Okay, we're going to have a look now at the bread again. What you want is for it to be dry on top. You can tell if it's cooked all the way through, if the very top layer seems dry and baked. It won't turn golden like in a regular oven, however. And we're hoping that the underside is golden and not too cooked. I'm going to take it out very carefully of the pan. And cut a piece and see how the bottom looks. It's going to be a surprise for me. Well, it's a little darker than I like it, but it's still good. Butter on it while it's still warm. Oh my, and some honey. Let's see. I think I'll just break a piece off. It's going to be messy. Oh, it's so good. It reminds me of those breakfasts in the van.